The Sterling estate loomed like a cathedral of wealth, its spires piercing the twilight sky. Elara Voss, a 32-year-old architect with a penchant for designing structures that defied gravity, stood at the edge of the manicured lawn, her emerald engagement ring glinting under the chandelier's glow. She was about to marry Alaric Sterling, heir to the Sterling dynasty, a family whose name was synonymous with power, prestige, and whispered scandals. Tonight was their engagement gala, a spectacle of opulence, but the air was thick with something darker than celebration. Elara adjusted her sapphire gown, its fabric clinging to her like a second skin. She scanned the crowd, men in tailored tuxedos, women dripping in diamonds, their smiles sharp as glass. Alaric was across the room, laughing with his father, Lord Beaumont Sterling, whose steel-gray eyes seemed to appraise her like a piece of art he wasn't sure he wanted to buy. A woman in an emerald-green dress glided toward her, her movements fluid, almost predatory. Her face was half hidden by a cascade of raven hair, but her eyes burned with intent. "Elara," she whispered, leaning close enough for her breath to tickle Elara's ear. "Watch your back. Not all that glitters is gold in this family." Before Elara could respond, the woman vanished into the crowd, leaving only the scent of jasmine and a chill down Elara's spine. "Everything all right, darling?" Alaric's voice was warm, but his smile didn't reach his eyes as he joined her, a champagne flute in hand. "Who was that woman?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the unease coiling in her gut. Alaric frowned, glancing around. "What woman?" "In the green dress. She just—" Elara stopped. The crowd parted, but the mysterious figure was gone. "Never mind." The night wore on, but the warning lingered. Hours later, in the bridal suite, Elara prepared for bed, her mind replaying the woman's words. She opened the wardrobe to hang her gown and froze. Her custom-made wedding dress, a delicate lace masterpiece, lay in tatters, slashed as if by a blade. A note pinned to the fabric read, "Leave while you can." "Alaric," she called, her voice trembling. He rushed in, his face paling at the sight. "Who did this?" he demanded, his hands clenching into fists. "I'll have security check the cameras." But Elara's eyes were on the note, her architect's mind already designing a defense against an unseen enemy. This wasn't a prank, it was a declaration of war. The honeymoon in Santorini was a blur of turquoise waters and Alaric's tender promises, but back at the Sterling mansion, Elara's world began to tilt. It started subtly, a wave of dizziness as she sipped her morning tea, a bitter aftertaste she couldn't place. By noon, nausea gripped her, and her vision blurred, turning the mansion's ornate halls into a kaleidoscope of gold and shadow. "Perhaps it's the stress of the move," Alaric suggested over breakfast, his brow furrowed with concern. "You've been working too hard." "Maybe," Elara murmured, pushing her tea away. She noticed Silas, the butler, hovering nearby, his gaunt face unreadable. He cleared her cup with a swiftness that felt almost rehearsed, his eyes avoiding hers. "Silas, what's in this tea?" she asked, her tone light but probing. He froze, then recovered with a tight smile. "Just the usual blend, Mrs. Sterling. Chamomile and mint. Shall I fetch you another?" "No, thank you," she said, watching him retreat. The gritty residue at the bottom of her cup hadn't escaped her notice, nor had Silas's haste to dispose of it. That evening, alone in the library, Elara confided in her best friend, Nora, over a video call. "I feel like I'm losing my mind, Nora. It's like, something's wrong with me, but I can't pin it down." Nora's face, framed by her wild curls, was grim. "You're not imagining things, Elara. Get that tea tested. And don't tell Alaric yet. Not until you're sure." Elara nodded, her resolve hardening. She slipped a sample of the tea into a small vial, tucking it into her purse. The mansion, with its endless corridors and watchful portraits, felt less like a home and more like a gilded trap. The Sterling household buzzed with quiet efficiency, but beneath the polished surface, Elara sensed a current of secrets. She caught fragments of hushed conversations, servants' glances that lingered too long. One morning, as she passed the kitchen, she overheard a new housemaid, Clara, chatting nervously with a cook. "Mrs. Sterling asked about the powders again," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "Lady Seraphina was furious, said we're never to mention them." Elara's heart quickened. She stepped into the kitchen, feigning a smile. "Clara, Could you help me with something in the dining room? Clara, a freckled girl barely out of her teens, followed, her eyes wide. Once alone, Elara softened her tone. Clara, what powders were you talking about? The girl paled, her hands twisting in her apron. I shouldn't have said anything, ma'am. Please, I'll lose my job. I won't tell a soul, Elara promised, her voice gentle but firm. But I need to know. Clara hesitated, then whispered, There's a locked cabinet in the pantry. Lady Seraphina keeps things there. Powders, vials. She says it's for her health, but we're not allowed to touch it. Ever. Elara's mind raced. Thank you, Clara. You did the right thing. That night, Elara lay awake, the word powders echoing in her mind. She thought of the gritty residue in her tea, the dizziness, the nausea. Was it coincidence, or something far more sinister? Driven by suspicion, Elara ventured into the mansion's archives, a labyrinth of dusty tomes and forgotten records in the east wing. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and secrets. She spent hours combing through files, her architect's precision guiding her search for answers. Deep in a forgotten box, she found a stack of yellowed newspaper clippings. The headline screamed of tragedy. Lysandra Sterling, wife of Julian Sterling, dies at 29. The articles described a protracted illness, with symptoms chillingly familiar: dizziness, nausea, blurred vision. Lysandra, Alaric's older brother's first wife, had been a vibrant artist before her sudden decline. The Sterlings had mourned publicly, but the reports were vague, the details buried. Elara's hands trembled as she read a handwritten note tucked among the clippings, in a looping script she didn't recognize. They'll never let her go. She knew too much. Find anything interesting? Alaric's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Elara tucked the note into her sleeve, forcing a smile. Just learning about your family's history. It's fascinating. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. Careful, Elara. Some histories are best left buried. His words hung heavy as he left. Elara's resolve solidified. She wasn't just fighting for her health, but for the truth about a woman who'd walked these halls before her. The mansion's west wing was a ghost of its former grandeur, its corridors dim and neglected. Elara, driven by a mix of fear and determination, explored it late one night, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. She'd overheard Silas mention a basement chamber to Lady Seraphina, and her instincts screamed it held answers. At the end of a narrow staircase, she found a heavy oak door, its lock gleaming new against the weathered wood. Through a crack, she glimpsed Lady Seraphina inside, her silver hair glowing under a single bulb. The matriarch was arranging vials and boxes on a metal table, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. Her eyes held a cold, calculating focus that sent a shiver through Elara. Seraphina, what are you doing down here? Lord Beaumont's voice echoed from the shadows, startling both Elara and the matriarch. Seraphina's lips curled into a thin smile. Ensuring our legacy, dear. You worry too much. It's risky, he hissed. If she finds out. She won't, Seraphina snapped, her voice like ice. Not if we're careful. Elara's heart pounded as she retreated, her mind racing. The vials, the powders, Lysandra's death, it was all connected. She needed proof, but the locked chamber was a fortress. She'd have to outsmart the Sterlings at their own game. The Sterling mansion was a maze of shadows at midnight, its silence heavy with secrets. Elara, unable to sleep, sat on the edge of her bed, her mind replaying Lady Seraphina's sinister focus in the locked chamber. Alaric slept beside her, his breathing steady, but Elara's trust in him was fraying. She glanced at his phone on the nightstand, its screen glowing faintly. A reckless impulse seized her. She picked it up, her fingers trembling as she entered his passcode, his mother's birthday, a detail he'd shared during their honeymoon. The screen unlocked, revealing a string of deleted messages. One, sent from an unknown number, caught her eye. The food poisoning is acting up again. Just like with her. The timestamp was from yesterday. Elara's blood ran cold. Her could only mean Lysandra, or herself. Who's texting you at this hour? Alaric's voice, groggy but sharp, made her flinch. He sat up, his eyes narrowing as he saw his phone in her hands. I couldn't sleep, Elara stammered, locking the screen. I was just checking the time. He studied her, his expression unreadable. You don't trust me, do you? It's not that, she lied, forcing a smile. I'm just adjusting to all this. She gestured vaguely at the opulent room, her heart pounding. Alaric softened, pulling her close. This family can be overwhelming. But I'm on your side, Elara. Always. She nodded, but his words felt hollow. As he drifted back to sleep, Elara's mind raced. The message wasn't proof, but it was a crack in the Sterling facade. She needed more, something concrete to expose the truth. The next morning, over breakfast, Lady Seraphina's gaze lingered on Elara, her smile as sharp as a blade. You look pale, dear. Are you unwell? Just a headache, Elara replied, sipping her tea cautiously. She'd swapped her cup with a fresh one from the kitchen, avoiding Silas's watchful eyes. The gritty residue was gone, but the memory of it lingered. Perhaps a rest would do you good, Seraphina purred, her tone dripping with false concern. Elara met her gaze, her architect's mind designing a counterattack. I'm fine, thank you. I have plans to explore the estate today. Seraphina's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. Do be careful. Old houses can be treacherous. Elara transformed her fear into action, treating the mansion like a blueprint she needed to decode. She began documenting everything, photographing the faint residue in her teacup, logging her symptoms in a hidden notebook, and noting every sidelong glance from the staff. She installed a small camera in her purse, its lens disguised as a decorative pin, to capture any suspicious behavior. One afternoon, in the garden, she overheard Silas speaking to a groundskeeper. She's asking questions, Silas muttered, his voice low. The matriarch won't like it. Let her dig, the groundskeeper replied, smirking. She'll find nothing but dirt. Elara's pulse quickened. She retreated to the library, her sanctuary, and called Nora. They know I'm on to something, she whispered, her voice urgent. I need to move faster. Elara, you're playing with fire, Nora warned. If they're poisoning you, you need to get out. Not yet, Elara said, her jaw set. I won't run until I have proof. Lysandra didn't get that chance. She spent the evening researching scopolamine, a toxin she'd read about in a medical journal. Its symptoms, dizziness, nausea, blurred vision, matched hers perfectly. It was odorless, tasteless, and deadly in high doses. The thought that it might be in her tea sent a chill through her. That night, she slipped into the kitchen, her flashlight beam darting across the counters. The locked cabinet Clara had mentioned was there, its padlock gleaming. She tugged at it, but it didn't budge. A creak in the hallway made her freeze. She ducked behind a counter as Silas entered, his eyes scanning the room before he left. Elara exhaled, her resolve hardening. She was in a silent war, and the enemy was closer than she'd feared. Elara's obsession with Lysandra grew, her fate a mirror of Elara's own. She tracked down Martha, Lysandra's distant cousin, through an old address in the archives. Martha lived in a small cottage an hour from the city, its garden overgrown with roses. Martha, a frail woman with sharp blue eyes, welcomed Elara cautiously. You're the new Sterling bride, she said, her voice laced with pity. I saw your wedding in the papers. Poor girl. I need to know about Lysandra, Elara said, sitting across from her. What happened to her? Martha sighed, her hands trembling as she poured tea. Lysandra was bright, like you. Full of life. Then she married Julian Sterling, and she changed. She got sick, dizzy spells, nausea. The doctors called it a nervous condition, but I never believed it. Did she suspect anything? Elara pressed, her heart racing. Martha nodded. She wrote to me once, said she found something in the mansion, a room, hidden away. She was scared, said the Sterlings were watching her. Then she was gone. The family said it was her heart, but Lysandra was healthy as a horse. Elara leaned forward. Did she mention powders? Or vials? Martha's eyes widened. She said Seraphina had a collection, strange things she kept locked up. Lysandra thought they were dangerous. Elara's mind spun. The locked chamber, the powders, the symptoms, it was all connected. Thank you, Martha, she said, standing. "You've helped more than you know." As she drove back, a car tailed her, its headlights too close. She sped up, her knuckles white on the wheel, until it veered off. Was it a warning, or her imagination? Either way, she knew time was running out. Lady Seraphina announced a Sterling Matriarch's Tea, an exclusive event for the women of the family. The invitation, delivered by Silas on a silver tray, felt like a summons to battle. Elara saw it as her chance to confront the enemy on their turf. She prepared meticulously, sewing a miniature recording device into the lining of her dress. The device, a gift from Nora's tech-savvy brother, was voice-activated and nearly invisible. Elara practiced her smile in the mirror, her architect's precision guiding her every move. The tea was held in the grand parlor, its walls adorned with portraits of Sterling matriarchs, their eyes cold and judgmental. Seraphina presided over the gathering, her silver hair gleaming like a crown. The other women, Alaric's aunts, cousins, and sisters-in-law, watched Elara with thinly veiled hostility. "Elara, you're settling in beautifully," Seraphina said, her voice smooth as poison. "The Sterling name suits you." "Thank you," Elara replied, her tone equally polished. "I'm learning so much about the family's traditions." A ripple of tension passed through the room. Alaric's aunt, Beatrice, a woman with a hawk-like nose, leaned forward. "Some traditions are best left unquestioned, dear." Elara smiled, her heart pounding. "Oh, I'm curious by nature. It's the architect in me, always looking for hidden structures." Seraphina's eyes narrowed, but she changed the subject, discussing estate matters with practiced ease. Elara listened, her recorder capturing every word, waiting for the moment she knew was coming. As the tea progressed, Seraphina rose, her presence commanding silence. "Elara," she said, holding a delicate porcelain cup, its surface etched with gold. "This is a Sterling heirloom, passed down through generations of wives. A symbol of our legacy. I'd like you to drink from it today." The room stilled, every eye on Elara. The cup gleamed under the chandelier, its beauty masking a threat Elara felt in her bones. She thought of Lysandra, of the powders, of the gritty residue in her tea. "Thank you," Elara said, accepting the cup. Its weight felt ominous in her hands. She brought it to her lips, her mind racing. She'd rehearsed this moment, anticipating a trap. With a subtle flick of her wrist, she swapped her cup with Seraphina's, a move so swift it went unnoticed in the dim light. Seraphina raised her own cup, smiling. "To family," she toasted, her eyes locked on Elara. "To family," Elara echoed, feigning a sip. She watched as Seraphina drank deeply, her throat moving with each swallow. The conversation resumed, but Elara's pulse thundered. Had she miscalculated? Was the cup a test, or something worse? She glanced at Seraphina, searching for a sign, but the matriarch's face was a mask of composure. As the tea ended, Seraphina stood to dismiss the group, her hand brushing Elara's arm. "You're stronger than I thought," she murmured, her voice low. "But strength can be a dangerous thing." Elara met her gaze, her recorder still running. "I'm learning that," she said, her voice steady. "And I'm a quick study." The Sterling parlor was a stage, its opulent decor a backdrop for the deadly drama unfolding. Elara's heart thundered as she held the heirloom cup, its porcelain cool against her lips. Lady Seraphina's eyes gleamed with expectation, the other women watching like vultures circling prey. Elara knew this was no mere toast, this was a test, and her life hung in the balance. She'd rehearsed the swap countless times in her mind, her architect's precision guiding her hands. As Seraphina raised her cup, Elara mirrored the gesture, her fingers deftly exchanging her cup with Seraphina's in a fluid motion disguised by the clink of porcelain and the rustle of her dress. The swap was invisible, a sleight of hand born of desperation and cunning. "To family," Seraphina intoned, her voice a velvet blade. "To family," Elara echoed, her eyes locked on Seraphina's. She tilted the cup, letting the liquid touch her lips without drinking, her senses alert for any sign of betrayal. Seraphina drank deeply, her throat bobbing, oblivious to the switch. The room buzzed with small talk, but Elara's focus was razor-sharp. She watched Seraphina for any reaction, her recorder humming softly in her dress. Beatrice, Alaric's hawk-nosed aunt, leaned close, her voice a hiss. "You're quite the actress, Elara." But this stage belongs to us." Elara smiled thinly. Every stage needs a surprise ending. Minutes passed, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Serafina's hand trembled slightly as she set her cup down, a faint sheen of sweat on her brow. Elara's pulse quickened. Was it beginning? She kept her expression neutral, her mind racing through the possibilities. Had she outsmarted the matriarch, or was she still a pawn in their game? As the gathering dispersed, Serafina pulled Elara aside, her grip like iron. "You're clever, dear," she whispered, her breath hot against Elara's ear. "But clever girls don't last long here." Elara met her gaze, unflinching. "We'll see who lasts, Serafina." The parlor's grandeur faded as chaos erupted. Serafina, midway through a sentence, gasped, her hand clutching her chest. Her face contorted, eyes wide with shock, as she staggered, the heirloom cup slipping from her grasp. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The women froze, their gasps filling the air as Serafina collapsed, her silver hair fanning out like a halo. "Call an ambulance!" Beatrice shrieked, rushing to Serafina's side. Elara stepped back, her heart pounding but her face a mask of concern. She slipped her hand into her pocket, ensuring the recorder was still running. "Stay calm," Elara said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. She knelt beside Serafina, feigning worry. "What's happening? Is she all right?" Beatrice glared, her eyes wild. "What did you do to her?" "Nothing," Elara said, her tone innocent. "She drank from her own cup." The ambulance arrived swiftly, paramedics swarming the parlor. Elara watched as they loaded Serafina onto a stretcher, her face pale and her breathing shallow. Alaric burst in, his expression a mix of shock and suspicion. "Elara, what happened?" he demanded, grabbing her arm. "I don't know," she lied, her eyes meeting his. "She just collapsed." As the paramedics rushed Serafina away, Elara slipped out to the hallway, her mind racing. She'd turned the tables, but the game wasn't over. She needed to act fast. She found a quiet corner and called Nora, her voice low. "It worked, Nora. The swap worked. But I need you to get that tea sample to a lab, now." "On it," Nora replied, her voice tense. "Be careful, Elara. They'll come for you next." Elara hung up, her resolve steeling. The Sterlings had underestimated her, and now they'd taste their own poison. At the hospital, Elara sat in the waiting room, her composure a carefully constructed facade. The sterile air buzzed with tension as doctors worked to stabilize Serafina. Alaric paced, his face drawn, while Beatrice whispered furiously to another relative. Elara clutched her purse, the recorder inside a ticking bomb of evidence. A detective, a grizzled man named Hargrove, approached her. "Mrs. Sterling, can you tell me what happened at the tea?" Elara's heart skipped, but she kept her voice steady. "It was a family gathering. Lady Serafina offered me a special cup, an heirloom. She drank from hers and then, she collapsed." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "Anything unusual about the cup?" Elara hesitated, then leaned close, her voice a whisper. "You'll want to hear this." She handed him the recorder, her fingers brushing his. "It's all there, everything you need to know." He raised an eyebrow but took the device, promising to review it. Hours later he returned, his expression grim. Toxicology came back. Scopolamine in her system. High dose. Care to explain? Elara's breath caught, but she'd prepared for this. "I suspected something was wrong with my tea for weeks. I swapped the cups at the last second. I think they meant it for me." Hargrove studied her, then nodded. "We're searching the mansion. Stay close." Elara nodded, her mind racing. The recorder held Serafina's veiled threats, Beatrice's cryptic warnings, and snippets of the matriarch's tea conversations, enough to raise suspicion. But the real proof was in the basement chamber, and she prayed the police would find it. As Alaric approached, his eyes searching hers, she forced a tearful expression. "I'm so scared, Alaric. What's happening to us?" He pulled her into his arms, but his embrace felt cold. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice tight. Elara nodded, but her architect's mind was already designing her next move. Serafina lay in a hospital bed, her face gaunt under the fluorescent lights. The doctors had stabilized her, but the scopolamine had left her weak and disoriented. Elara, allowed a brief visit under police supervision, stood at her bedside, her recorder hidden in her sleeve. "Serafina," Elara said softly, her voice laced with feigned concern. "Why did this happen?" Serafina's eyes, clouded with sedatives, flickered with recognition. You clever girl," she rasped, her voice slurring. "We saw how Alaric adored you. Couldn't risk another scandal, just like with her." Elara's blood ran cold. "Her? You mean Lysandra?" Serafina's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "She asked too many questions, like you. Had to protect the family, the legacy." Elara leaned closer, her recorder catching every word. "You poisoned her, didn't you? And you tried to poison me." Serafina's eyes widened, a flicker of panic breaking through her haze. No proof. You'll never." "There's proof," Elara said, her voice low and firm. "The basement. The unsplash. System, the police found the basement chamber, didn't they?" Elara asked, her voice steady but laced with steel. Serafina's eyes fluttered, her breathing labored. "You'll pay for this. The Sterlings always win." "Not this time," Elara whispered, stepping back as a nurse entered. She left the room, her heart pounding with the weight of Serafina's confession. It was the key to unlocking the Sterling Empire's secrets. The police raid on the Sterling mansion was swift and relentless. Elara stood in the grand foyer, watching as officers carried boxes from the basement chamber. The locked door had been forced open, revealing shelves of vials, powders, and handwritten notes, evidence of a meticulously planned crime. The air was thick with shock as Alaric and Lord Beaumont were escorted out in handcuffs, their faces pale with disbelief. Detective Hargrove approached Elara, holding a sealed evidence bag. "We found scopolamine, among other things," he said, his voice grim. "Enough to take down a dozen people. Your recording was illuminating." Elara nodded, her throat tight. "What happens now?" "We're building a case," Hargrove said. "Conspiracy, attempted murder, maybe more. The Sterling name won't protect them." Elara glanced at Alaric, his eyes locked on her, a mix of betrayal and confusion. "Elara, why?" he asked, his voice breaking as the officers led him away. She didn't answer, her heart a tangle of grief and resolve. She'd loved him once, but the truth had shattered that illusion. The Sterlings had built their empire on lies and poison, and she'd exposed them. That evening, Elara met Nora at a quiet cafe, the weight of the day pressing on her. "It's over," she said, sipping coffee. "But it doesn't feel like a victory." Nora squeezed her hand. "You survived, Elara. You took down a dynasty. That's more than most could do." Elara's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Lysandra didn't survive. I did this for her, too." Nora nodded, her voice soft. "You're a hero, you know that?" Elara shook her head. "I'm just an architect who saw the cracks in their foundation." Back at the mansion, Elara stood in the foyer, the silence deafening. The police had left, but the house felt alive with ghosts, Lysandra's, and now Serafina's legacy of deceit. Elara's phone buzzed with a news alert. Sterling family faces charges in poisoning scandal. The empire was crumbling, and Elara held the hammer. The Sterling mansion, once a fortress of untouchable wealth, was now a crime scene, its marble halls crawling with police and reporters. Elara stood on the grand staircase, watching the chaos unfold. Alaric, Lord Beaumont, and 2 Sterling cousins were detained, their tailored suits replaced by the stark reality of handcuffs. The news spread like wildfire. Sterling dynasty rocked by poisoning conspiracy. Detective Hargrove approached, his face etched with fatigue. "We've got enough to charge them with conspiracy and attempted murder," he said, his voice low. "Your evidence was the linchpin, Mrs. Sterling." "Elara," she corrected, her tone firm. "I'm not one of them, not anymore." Hargrove nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You've turned this city upside down. The press is calling you a whistleblower. They're clamoring for your story." "Let them clamor," Elara said, her gaze steady. "I'm not here for their headlines." She stepped outside, where cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, their voices a cacophony. "Mrs. Sterling, did you know about the poison? How does it feel to bring down your own family?" Elara ignored them, slipping into a waiting car. Nora was inside, her face grim but proud. "You did it," Nora said, gripping Elara's hand. "The Sterlings are finished." "Not yet," Elara replied, her eyes fixed on the mansion's silhouette. "There's still work to do." That night, social media erupted with posts from X, hashtags like #SterlingScandal and #Elara Voss trending. Anonymous accounts speculated wildly, some calling her a hero, others a traitor. Elara scrolled through the posts, her jaw tight. The city's elite, once the Sterling's allies, were distancing themselves, their carefully curated reputations crumbling alongside the dynasty. In a quiet moment, Elara called Martha, Lysandra's cousin. "It's over," she said softly. "They can't hurt anyone else." Martha's voice trembled. "You gave Lysandra justice, Elara." "Thank you." Elara hung up, her heart heavy but resolute. The Sterling's empire was fracturing, and she was the fault line. The next morning, Elara was summoned to the Sterling family's law firm, a towering glass building that reeked of old money. The lawyer, a wiry man named Mr. Caldwell, greeted her with a nervous smile. "Mrs. Sterling, Elara, this is unprecedented." "What is it?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. Caldwell slid a document across the desk. Lady Seraphina, in her sedated state, signed an updated estate plan before the incident. "It names you as the primary beneficiary of a significant portion of the Sterling holdings, properties, investments, liquid assets. It's worth billions." Elara's breath caught. This can't be right. Why would she do that? Caldwell adjusted his glasses. She was incoherent, muttering about securing the legacy. "We believe she mistook you for someone else, perhaps Lysandra, or even herself in her delirium. It's legally binding, regardless." Elara stared at the document, her mind reeling. The woman who tried to poison her had inadvertently handed her the keys to the empire. It was a cruel irony, but one Elara could use. "Are you sure this is ironclad?" she asked, her architect's mind already analyzing the structure of this new power. "Absolutely," Caldwell said. "The board is in disarray, and with the family under investigation, you're the de facto head." Elara left the office, her head spinning. She called Nora, her voice urgent. "You won't believe this. They've given me the Sterling fortune." Nora gasped. "You're kidding. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Elara admitted. "But I won't let it be their legacy anymore." That evening, she walked through the mansion, its silence no longer oppressive but hers to command. She paused at a portrait of Lysandra, her eyes bright with life. "I'll make it right," Elara whispered, a vow to the woman who'd never had a chance. Elara stood at a podium in the Sterling estate's courtyard, facing a sea of reporters. The sun glinted off the mansion's spires, a stark contrast to the storm of scandal. Cameras rolled, capturing her every word. She wore a tailored suit, her posture radiating quiet authority, no longer the wary bride but a woman in control. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "The Sterling family's actions have shocked us all. I've cooperated fully with the authorities to ensure justice is served. As the unexpected inheritor of their assets, I pledge to manage them with integrity and transparency. This legacy will no longer be built on secrets." A reporter shouted, "Will you keep the Sterling name?" Elara's lips curved into a faint smile. "The name is a relic. I'm here to build something new." The press conference ended in a flurry of questions, but Elara walked away, her resolve unshaken. She met with the Sterling board later that day, a group of gray-haired men and women who eyed her with suspicion. "You're an outsider," one said, his tone dripping with disdain. "I'm the one holding the reins," Elara replied, her voice cold. "You can work with me, or you can leave." They grumbled but complied, their power diminished by the scandal. Elara spent hours reviewing the family's holdings, real estate, tech investments, offshore accounts. She began redirecting funds to charitable initiatives, including a foundation in Lysandra's name for women escaping toxic environments. Nora joined her that night, bringing takeout to the mansion's library. "You're a force, Elara," she said, grinning. The city's calling you the architect of justice. Elara laughed, a rare sound. I just want to fix what they broke. The courtroom was a battlefield, its oak benches filled with spectators and reporters. Alaric, Lord Beaumont, and the implicated Sterling relatives faced charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, and obstruction of justice. Elara sat in the gallery, her presence drawing whispers. She wasn't there to gloat, she was there to see Lysandra's justice fulfilled. The prosecution played her recording, Seraphina's slurred confession echoing through the courtroom. We saw how Alaric adored you, couldn't risk another scandal, just like with her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alaric's face crumpled, his eyes avoiding Elara's. The evidence was overwhelming, vials from the basement, chemical analyses, and testimonies from Clara and Martha. The Sterling's defense crumbled, their once impenetrable reputation in tatters. The judge sentenced Alaric and Beaumont to decades in prison, the cousins to lesser terms. Seraphina, still recovering, faced trial later. Outside, reporters swarmed Elara. How do you feel, bringing down your husband's family? One asked. Elara's voice was steady. I feel like the truth won. She drove to the coast, needing solitude. The ocean stretched before her, vast and unyielding. She thought of Alaric's betrayal, the love she'd once felt now a distant memory. The Sterlings had tried to erase her, just as they'd erased Lysandra, but she'd rewritten their story. Nora called, her voice bright. The ex-posts are going wild. People are calling you a legend. Let them talk, Elara said, watching the waves. I'm done with their noise. Elara stood in the Sterling mansion's foyer, its grandeur no longer a cage but a canvas. She'd hired architects to redesign the estate, turning it into a community center for education and empowerment. The portraits of Sterling matriarchs were gone, replaced by Lysandra's artwork, a tribute to the woman who'd inspired her fight. She walked through the halls, her steps echoing with purpose. The basement chamber was sealed, its secrets exposed to the world. Elara had sold off most of the Sterling assets, funneling the profits into scholarships, shelters, and research grants. The empire was no more, but its wealth was rebuilding lives. Nora joined her, carrying blueprints. You're really doing this, she said, her eyes shining. A new legacy. It's not about legacy, Elara replied, tracing the plans. It's about purpose. That evening, she hosted a small gathering, Martha, Clara, and a few trusted allies. They toasted to Lysandra, to justice, to new beginnings. You're free now, Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. What's next? Elara smiled, her architect's mind already designing the future. I build. Not just buildings, but lives, communities. I'm done surviving, I'm creating. As the guests left, Elara stood alone, the mansion quiet around her. She thought of the mysterious woman in the emerald dress, the slashed gown, the poisoned tea. She'd outsmarted them all with one word, truth. It had dismantled an empire and set her free. She stepped onto the balcony, the city skyline glittering below. The Sterling name was dust, but Elara Voss was a force, ready to shape a world where no one else would be silenced. The end.